Tonight we hear the inside story of international diplomatic efforts to free the Israeli hostages being held by Hamas. This is a Sky News special programme, live from Jerusalem. A Qatari negotiator tells Sky News all civilian hostages could be freed from Gaza in days if Israel pauses its attacks.
Any escalation whatsoever is going to make our job really harder. Any escalation whatsoever. So we're trying to send those messages to our partners and friends.
It comes just hours after Israeli tanks conduct a targeted raid in Gaza. Tonight, Israeli Defense Forces tell us they are preparing to step up military action after 2 weeks of war against Hamas. And we have forensic analysis of the damage done to Gaza as Israel continues to surround the Palestinian territory. Good evening then from Jerusalem. Qatar's senior hostage negotiator has told Sky News he believes all civilians held by Hamas in Gaza can be released in the coming days, but a pause in the fighting is needed. In an exclusive interview, Qatar's Minister of State said any escalation in the conflict would hamper efforts being made to free the hostages. Mohammed Al-Khalifi has been speaking to our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, in Doha.
It is a world away from Gaza. Qatar's skyline troubled only by a rare autumn storm. But they are playing an outsized role here in the conflict by mediating the fate of its hostages.
It's a very, very difficult negotiation that we've been dealing with. And with this violence increases every day, with the bombing continuous every day, our task has become even more difficult.
Qatar was instrumental in the release of the only 4 hostages to be freed so far, an American mother and daughter and 2 elderly Israeli women. There are thought to be more than 200 left behind from 25 different countries.
Trying to deliver those messages.
Giving his only interview since the war began, Qatari negotiator Dr. Mohammed Al-Khalifi says there is now the opportunity to release many more.
Our target is to release all of the civilian hostages. That's what we're working on, and that's what we want to achieve. We're getting there. Every day we become more hopeful of the possibility of filling that gap and bringing the parties together. We remain hopeful. We do the best as we can, trying to get everyone's soon, and hopefully we can achieve that goal within the upcoming days.
Can you talk about the mechanics of the release of hostages and how much the bombing gets in the way of that? I mean, what is the problem there? Is it actually getting out to the hostages and getting them to safety?
I think it's mainly the difficulties for us to talk to the two sides. When an escalation happens and the killing of people over there, it's getting more difficult for us to talk logically to the people sitting there on the negotiating table.
There's a catch. For more hostages to come out, the violence must pause from both sides.
Is it fair to say if Israel goes in on the ground, it's going to make your job a lot harder?
Any escalation whatsoever is going to make our job really harder. Any escalation whatsoever. So we're trying to send those messages to our partners and friends. It's very important that everyone participate in this. Everyone should ask and seek a level where we could achieve even more out of this conflict.
There must be a reprieve in the fighting to let in more aid, they say. If not, Gaza's humanitarian situation could become catastrophic.
I think it's going to be disaster. I think it's going to be disaster. It's the situation over there is really horrible. The lack of water, food, medicine, fuel to generate the energy over there. It is not going to help sustaining the situation.
They are bracing themselves here and across the region for escalating conflict, but hoping for some kind of lull to let diplomacy still have a chance of working.
And Dominic joins me live now from Doha. Good evening, Dominic. So, key question really, do you see Israel agreeing to any sort of deal here?
I think, Mark, the problem is the total lack of trust and confidence between the two sides, and that's what Mohammed Al-Khalifi made pretty clear to us. He said, that there is a determination amongst the Israelis and the international community to get all the hostages out, all the civilian ones at least, that they believe is possible to do at some point in the near future. And Hamas seems equally keen to get rid of them if the conditions are right, or willing to do so. Certainly what they said to us in an interview with Khaled Mashal a few days ago. But the problem is they just don't trust each other. So when Hamas says via the Qataris it's difficult to know where all the hostages are, how to get out to them, it's a process that's difficult to do. We need a pause in the fighting to do that. And when the Qataris say that they need a pause in the fighting because every new fresh bombardment, every new massacre, as Hamas would see it, raises tempers in Gaza and makes it much harder for the Qataris to sell a logical, creative solution that can get some hostages out. The Israelis are suspicious because they see Hamas as possibly playing a waiting game, a delaying game to try and put off a new ground invasion or fresh attacks. And therefore, I think what the Qataris are trying to do is build trust, build confidence, and to bridge that gap. What they're saying is they are hopeful that it is possible to get all the civilian hostages out within days if there is a pause in the fighting. And I think all eyes are now on the Israelis to see if they will be willing to do that, hold off their ground offensive for some time, but also to reduce at least the amount of aerial bombardment they are raining down on Gaza. If they do, the Qataris are confident a significant number of hostages can be released.
OK, Dominic, thank you very much indeed. And despite the intense negotiations involving Qatar, last night saw a significant military escalation in this crisis. Israeli troops carried out raids in Gaza following days of heavy bombardment. Our Middle East correspondent, Alistair Bunkle, has this report.
In the early hours of this morning, the Israeli military conducted its biggest ground incursion into Gaza since this war began. Tanks and infantry soldiers went through the barrier fence in what Israel says was an operation to prepare the battlefield. They took out Hamas anti-tank positions and other infrastructure and then left. Sky News has geolocated the exact point where they entered along the northern section of the barrier.
The manoeuvre is only one stage in a long-term process that includes security, political and social aspects that will take years to complete. The campaign will soon ramp up with greater force.
By day, the Israeli bombing campaign continued. There have been more than 250 airstrikes in the last 24 hours. On the ground in Gaza, things are getting to breaking point. The UN says it desperately needs fuel to power its hospitals and water desalination plants. The Palestinian Health Ministry says that more than 7,000 Gazans have now died in the last 20 days. The Israeli bombing campaign has been the most intense of any country this century. Sawada Abu Uda's apartment was hit by an airstrike today. She lived there with her children and grandchildren. They're now homeless, and she has no idea why they were targeted.
They bombarded the building. Look at the bedroom where the children sleep. We didn't have any water from the day when the war started on the 7th of October. There is no running water. Check the cans. It's only a black slime coming out of the tap. We are all being penalised. We are civilians and did nothing wrong.
The United Nations held another emergency session in New York today, and both Israeli and Palestinian representatives addressed the chamber.
Should Hamas put down their arms, return our hostages and turn themselves in, this war will end without one more shot being fired.
Stop the bombs and save lives, as the President of the General Assembly has indicated. All lives, lives of children, of civilians, of 2.3 million civilians.
There is a lot of international pressure on both sides to call a pause to the fighting. This would create a window to get more aid into Gaza, and it could be an opportunity for Hamas to release civilian hostages. If that happened, it would only be a temporary ceasefire, though. Israel hasn't achieved its objectives yet. Alistair Buncle, Sky News in Israel.
Well, since Hamas launched its unprecedented assault and terror attack on Israel on October the 7th, Israel has been staging daily missile attacks on Gaza. More than 1,400 Israelis were killed in the initial massacres. It's thought at least 5,000 Palestinians in Gaza have been killed in air and artillery strikes carried out by the Israeli military in response. Data and forensics editor Tom Cheshire has been looking at the damage done to Gaza.
Nearly 3 weeks since Hamas launched its terrorist attacks against Israel and since Israel declared war, and an almost continual aerial bombardment of Gaza since then. Israel and Hamas have published differing accounts of the damage dealt and received. But information from satellite radar can help give us an independent look. This shows Gaza before the Hamas attacks, before the air campaign. And this is from the 13th of October. You can see damage starting to hit there. Our analysis shows that 7% of all buildings across the whole of Gaza have been damaged or destroyed at that point. Now, just to explain how this works, satellite radar measures the smoothness of surfaces, which might sound a bit odd, but an intact building will bounce the radar signal straight back up to the satellite smoothly, whereas rubble from an explosion scatters it. So the smoothness has changed, and you can see that on the key over there. That indicates damage and is marked on red, shades of red on the map. And this is what Gaza looks like 10 days later. The number of buildings damaged or destroyed had doubled to 15% of all buildings. And you can see from this that northern Gaza really has borne the heaviest brunt, although Israel has also been hitting targets down in the south. We'll look at that in a bit later. But the north, which has seen the majority of the destruction, this is the neighbourhood of Ramallah. It's what it looked like before, according to the damage map. By the 13th, it had already faced a barrage. And by the 25th, almost the entire neighbourhood had seen damage. Now, that may look abstract, so I just want to emphasise this isn't a broad estimate. It's based on people's buildings, people's homes, to map that damage. You can zoom right in. The footage on the ground does show the limits of satellite mapping. The buildings that have been levelled in the aftermath here will be picked up by the satellite because it's directly overhead. But other damage, like to the sides of buildings, won't be picked up. So because of that and other technical reasons, this is a very conservative estimate of the total damage. Israel had warned Palestinians to move out of the north towards the south. But strikes have been now carried out there too. This is the aftermath of one in Khan Yunis. And this was the satellite picture on the 13th. 10 days later, this is what it looks like. And on the 25th, it changed again. Our analysis shows that over the last 10 days, strikes have intensified in the south. Up until the 13th of October, 2% of buildings in the south had been damaged. Our analysis shows that by the 25th, it had quadrupled to 8% of all buildings. Again, this is a conservative estimate. But even one by this one satellite radar measure, the scale of the aerial assault is not only unrelenting, it is increasing in intensity.
You're watching Sky News live from Jerusalem. Coming up after last night's raid by Israeli troops into Gaza, we'll hear from the Israeli Defense Force as they promise further ground attacks.
It's all about bringing the awareness for our young children in the care system and our young care experience to try to get loving, secure homes for those children, foster care homes. And we're somewhat 10,000 short of foster carers. So it is a bit of a worry because our care system is, getting quite overloaded in many ways. I think there's 4.2 million families living in poverty as we speak. 105,000 children in the care system. I mean, a shortage of 10,000 foster carers. So if you think that you have a room in your home, you've got a heart that's open and your home open to give these children a loving, warm, secure stability in their life is what they need, a loving, secure home. And, it's not an easy job, but equally it's a very rewarding job. Well, I spent my first 14 years in children's homes. I was abandoned as a baby, some would say left to die. And
What would you say?
I personally, it was a tough 14 years of my life. And not having anybody that I could really connect to was something I think that a lot of children suffer today. They need somebody who they can have a bright, shining star in their life. I found that in one of the care homes that I lived, children's homes, with Auntie Ray, who was one of the 72-hour ladies, and she taught me a really important lesson in life. She said, when I asked her, would she be my mummy, she said, I can't just be your mummy. She said, but here's the thing, I can't always be there for the children, but you are. She said, so why don't you be their mummy? And that I learned, in giving you receive. And it was so important. And what I also learned was that these children are very vulnerable. You know, I was the same, yeah, they're vulnerable. They need the support and love of good foster carers. If we can find some more of those people, those special people out there to come forward.
The 5 of us have made it out of the car.
Welcome to Backstage, the film and TV podcast.
Well, last night saw Israeli troops carry out a targeted raid in northern Gaza. It was the largest ground operation inside the Gaza Strip during the war so far, but was limited in scope. Earlier I spoke with the spokesperson for the Israeli Defense Force, Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner. On the bombardment of Gaza, it's causing a death toll that is surpassing anything in the decades-long Israel-Palestine conflict. What percentage of the something like 700 deaths a day that are being reported from Gaza, what percentage are Hamas terrorists?
Mark, we are not bombarding Gaza. We are targeting Hamas. We are taking out their ability to manage the Gaza Strip as a staging ground against our people. They have intentionally
in terms of airstrikes, no, with the greatest respect, in terms of airstrikes, it is the largest bombardment this century. It is in terms of the number of strikes made by an air force, it is the largest bombardment this century. So of the 700 deaths a day, how many do you estimate to be Hamas terrorists?
In terms of terrorism, it was the largest attack ever in the history of the State of Israel that was conducted by a terrorist government with institutionalized terrorist tools and a terrorist army. We are taking the war to them, Mark. We will not sit idly by while they butcher, massacre, murder, rape, burn, behead, and then abduct Israelis. That won't happen. The expectation that this will be a sterile war is a misunderstanding of the concept of war. Indeed, we will seek out and destroy Hamas. They have no right to continue to take advantage of the civilian arena.
Okay, the reason I ask is because Save the Children, the international charity, says that this week 2,000 children have been killed in the bombardment, with more than 800 others buried in the rubble. They are clearly not Hamas terrorists, so how do you think that can be justified?
Mark, it is a true tragedy what is happening in Gaza today. However, it's not Israel's doing. Israel did not plan this war. I would even argue we failed in protecting our civilians, and Hamas came into our bedrooms and butchered our babies. But we are determined to change the paradigm. And it is indeed the civilians that are paying the price, but it is Hamas's doing.
That was Peter Lerner speaking to me earlier. Joining me now is Peter Millett, former British ambassador to Jordan. Good evening. Thank you very much for being with us, Peter. First of all, do you think the UK should be pushing or help to push for a ceasefire for humanitarian reasons, a pause in the airstrikes for humanitarian reasons?
Yes, I certainly do. And I think the position we've taken so far has not been clear. I think the best way to secure the safety of the hostages, but also to protect further killing of innocent women and children. And the numbers you've just said about the numbers of children being killed is unconscionable. And the UN has been very clear in saying that civilians must be protected and must have the essentials to survive. So I think a ceasefire is the best way to give diplomacy time to work, not only to secure further releases of hostages. So far, the work behind the scenes, the back channels between the Americans, the Qataris, no doubt the Egyptians and others working behind the scenes to secure the release of hostages. I do not believe that bombarding civilians with airstrikes is the best way to secure either the release of the hostages or a long-term peace and stability for Israel.
Do you think it is possible to do what the Israelis say they want to do, which is to wipe out Hamas?
I don't think that airstrikes and even bunker bombs and things like that is going to wipe out Hamas, because I think the killing of civilians, any young man who sees his mother, sister, daughter killed like that is going to be a very angry man. So in a way, it doesn't justify the terrorism, but it is a reason for more people to become extremist. And I also, what I'm really worried about is the much wider implications in the region. I mean, I spent a lot of time in Jordan, and you see the large demonstrations. In Jordan, I think tomorrow after Friday prayers across the Arab world, across the Muslim world, you're going to see much more public outrage. And if airstrikes or if the continuing bombardment is going to lead to miscalculations, there's a big risk of drawing in Hezbollah, the Iranians, the Houthis and others, of a much wider conflagration. And again, that is not in the interests of the security of Israel, let alone the security of the wider Middle East or of the world.
Do you think such an escalation is likely?
I think the politics of Israel means that Mr. Netanyahu has to be seen to be getting revenge. And I know that there's a lot of pressure within Israel for wiping out Hamas. That's fine, but Hamas does not represent the Palestinian people, does not represent the innocent civilians, the women, the children who are being killed in Gaza. So I think a ceasefire not only provides a framework for releasing the hostages, for bringing in the massive humanitarian assistance which is needed in Gaza, but also to look at the much longer term future of getting justice for the Palestinian people.
When this war ends, do you think that Israel knows what it wants to do with Gaza? Do you see any kind of end game for Gaza?
I think there's a real question as to who will be able to supervise or govern Gaza. It can't be Hamas. I don't think the Palestinian Authority has the ability, or even that the people in Gaza want the Palestinian Authority. I think it needs some sort of international umbrella to help the rebuilding of Gaza. And then there needs to be a process. President Biden has been talking again about a two-state solution. A two-state solution has been a mantra for diplomats for many, many years. The only alternative is a one-state solution, which is never going to work. But some sort of process needs to be got underway to bring a homeland for the Palestinian people, which is what they deserve.
And just finally, there's a question over whether Benjamin Netanyahu survives in the long term. If he does survive, can you ever see a Netanyahu government getting involved in peace negotiations, meaningful negotiations with the Palestinians?
Well, I think the last time he was involved in negotiations was when I was in Jordan and in Amman, and they quickly fizzled out and nothing has happened since. I think Mr. Netanyahu has done his best to undermine the Oslo Accords and to ensure that there isn't a two-state solution. But something along those lines is the only way to bring peace to the region, but also to bring the peace and security that the Israeli people themselves deserve.
Okay, Peter Millett, I appreciate your time tonight. Thank you very much for joining us. Now, a former Israeli Special Forces soldier who took part in the invasion of Gaza in 2014 has told us he fears Hamas can never be wiped out. Benzi Sanders, now an activist opposing the occupation of the Palestinian territories, says that the war may only strengthen support for Hamas's ideology by radicalizing many more young men. Earlier, I asked him about his time as a soldier fighting in Gaza.
My Special Forces infantry unit went to the border. The entire night sky was lit up with explosions, deafening explosions, as the Air Force and the artillery bombarded the village. We were going into a small village with the purpose of identifying and demolishing a tunnel that was going into Israel. We were only a few kilometers in. We weren't very deep in. We were trying to secure an area for these engineers to demolish the tunnels. We pulled out. Right after we pulled out, the Air Force came and demolished, obliterated almost the entire neighborhood that we were in.
So you had your experience, Benzi, in 2014. This is going to be altogether of a different magnitude, more civilian deaths, more threats to Israeli soldiers.
I mean, it's already multiple orders of magnitude worse. I mean, you know, something like 3 times as many Palestinians have already been killed through these bombing campaigns as there were killed in the entire 2014 war, and we haven't even began the ground invasion. Hamas is stronger. That's just a fact. Hamas is stronger, even though we fought them, and I believed during that fighting and with our sacrifice and all the destruction that we wrought in Gaza, that we had dealt them a decisive blow. But that was just not true.
Is it possible, do you think, to wipe out Hamas? The Israeli government has said after this appalling terror attack, we will wipe out Hamas. Is that possible?
I think the only way, I think this government is incapable of doing it unless there is a dramatic, axiomatic shift in our approach towards Palestinians. We approach towards Palestinians, they can just be controlled. We can just keep them indefinitely under military occupation, deny them rights, deny them freedoms, the same ones that we cherish for ourselves, they don't have. And it's not about security, it's about ideology. We're ideologically committed to controlling the entire land of Israel exclusively for the Jewish people. And
but there will be many Israelis who simply want revenge on Hamas for this hideous attack.
That will only strengthen them, even if we dismantle and are able to defeat the physical terrorist organization Hamas. We will be strengthening the idea of violent resistance, because the only way to defeat the idea of violent resistance is to create an alternative and to work towards an alternative, one that our government is fundamentally opposed to. So this government can't defeat Hamas.
So you think it will, in effect, radicalize another generation of young Palestinians?
Of course. We're just killing them, and we don't provide any alternative. We're keeping them under a debilitating siege. They're running out of fuel. They're running out of drinking water. What do you think that, Hamas is a terrorist organization. They've already proven that they can murder babies, and we're saying it's on them to save the lives of the Palestinian infants in the NICU in the hospital. It's up to them. You think they care? They just murdered babies, and we're denying that we're creating this horrific human conditions. What do you think the people in Gaza are going to think about us after what we're doing now? We have to create an alternative. If we want to defeat Hamas, we have to turn the Palestinian public against them.
But how do you do that? In the light of the terror attack, how do you do that? What is the process? Where is the process that doesn't include Hamas? Where is the process?
Well, we have to stop forcibly expelling Palestinians from their homes in villages throughout the West Bank. We have to crack down on settler violence, and we have to say out loud that we're committed towards a peaceful, negotiated solution with Palestinians in which they achieve freedom, achieve independence, and achieve the independence and rights that we cherish so dearly for ourselves.
What are your fears for the next few days and weeks?
You know, I fear for Palestinian civilians who are being relentlessly bombed. I fear for citizens of Israel who are vulnerable to escalations on multiple fronts because of this war. I feel for many friends and loved ones are.
Your brother's going in?
I hope not, but obviously, the tragedy is that no matter what we do, we won't be able to defeat the idea of that Hamas represents, the ideology that it represents of armed resistance, unless we try to create an alternative. And I really believe that this government is incapable of doing that.
Benzi, thank you very much indeed.
Sure thing.
You're watching Sky News. Coming up, more of the interview with the chief Qatari negotiator working to free Israeli hostages from Hamas. He tells Sky News all of them could be released if the fighting stops. Now, Qatar's senior negotiator has told Sky News he believes all civilian hostages in Gaza can be released in the coming days, but a pause in the fighting was needed. Speaking exclusively to Sky News, Qatar's Minister of State, Mohammed Al-Khalifi, said any escalation in the conflict would hamper efforts to secure the safe release of hostages. He was speaking to Sky's international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, in Qatar's capital, Doha.
Give us a sense of how challenging this is, particularly on the hostages. How tough is it?
It's a very, very difficult negotiation that we've been dealing with. I always say that one of the most difficult mediation is a difficult between two parties that have zero confidence in each other, and to have some sort of an indirect talks between the two sides is extremely difficult, you could imagine. So, and with this violence increases every day, with the bombing continuous every day, our task has become even more difficult. But despite that, we remain hopeful. We remain committed to our role of reaching out to the parties and with the aim of reaching a positive result.
And we've had 4 hostages, as you say, out. But give us a sense of what could come next. Is it fair to say at the moment that no more releases are imminent in the coming hours or possibly even days?
Our target is to release all of the civilian hostages. That's what we're working on, and that's what we want to achieve. Since the first hour, we've been receiving several calls from countries around the globe, asking Qatar's assistance to help their citizens in Gaza release. It is not an easy process. It's a very complicated process, but we're working with all of our efforts and our technical teams in trying to achieve that goal.
Is there an imminent release, do you think, in the coming hours or days?
Well, we're working towards that. We're working towards that, and that's why I was saying that the previous positive development helped us a lot to understand the process, but go more in deep when it comes to the procedures. So we remain hopeful, and we hope that within the upcoming days we can achieve that main objective.
Because the impression being given by some is that they've kind of hit a stumbling block and they're just impediments you can't get beyond.
Well, you can, as I mentioned, the difficulty is still there. If there's a continuing bombing, if there is a continuing escalation in the situation, our task is getting more difficult. The mediators need a period of calm, needs a situation where we can speak easily to both parts and try to be more creative in bringing more initiatives that can get those civilians out.
Can you talk about the mechanics of the release of hostages and how much the bombing gets in the way of that? I mean, what is the problem there? Is it actually getting out to the hostages and getting them to safety?
I think it's mainly the difficulties for us to talk to the two sides. When an escalation happens and the killing of people over there, it's getting more difficult for us to talk logically to the people sitting there on the negotiating table and allowing us to present initiative ideas to get them out. In any normal scenario, if the mediator wants to perform its task in the best way possible as a state, then we need to reach a period of calm. We need to reach a period where we can speak logically to the both sides and come up with positive initiatives on that. Now, again, despite those difficulties, we've managed to create a breakthrough. We've managed to create some positive developments, and we're building upon that to release everyone.
And is it fair to say if Israel goes in on the ground, it's going to make your job a lot harder?
Any escalation whatsoever is going to make our job really harder. Any escalation whatsoever. So we're trying to send those messages to our partners and friends. It's very important that everyone participate in this. Everyone should ask and seek a level where we could achieve even more out of this conflict.
And I suppose from the Israeli point of view, they're saying, look, they should be letting the Red Cross in to talk to the hostages. They know where they are, Hamas. Why not just hand them over? They're civilians. It's a war crime to hold them. What are the impediments to Hamas handing them over?
Well, it's a very difficult and complicated procedures. The good thing that we've managed to make some developments in the first few hours and the first few days, and we're building upon that. We understand that the challenges are unlimited, and maybe tomorrow we will have even more new challenges. But I think it's important for us to think creatively of how can we work together with our international partners to de-escalate the current situation, and that's our main focus.
Because I mean, families in Britain, in countries around the world, will be desperate for any information and news. What can you say to reassure them?
Well, we are in direct communication with their authorities over there. We are in direct communications. I'm assigned even to update many of our friends and international partners of those progress and developments. We're getting there. Every day we become more hopeful of the possibility of filling that gap and bringing the parties together. And I think with that continuation of efforts, we will be able to achieve.
From this unique role Qatar has, and I don't think any other country is able to talk to all the players in this conflict, really, are they, as well as you are? What are the chances of actually de-escalating what's happening here, but also what are the dangers, what's at stake for the region if that doesn't happen?
Well, as I mentioned to you, we have some priorities. And our priority right now is not to expand that circle of violence beyond the borders of the conflicted area itself. And that's a challenge that we've been facing. And to work on that matter, we've managed to work with our neighbors, regional players, and also international partners to make sure that we work together around facing those challenges and presenting permanent solutions to the issue. Now, in terms of this conflict, I have to say, the only solution for it is the long-standing, permanent and just solution for the Palestinian case. We've been calling for that. And our political position has been clear since day one when it comes to the Palestine situation. Palestine deserves to have an independent state by itself, based on the Arab Peace Initiative, two-state solution with the border of 1967 and East Jerusalem as its capital. This is nothing new. We have mentioned that before. We said that we need to go back again to the main issue, which is a permanent solution to the issue, and not to think of only temporary solutions and forget about the Palestinian case. And I think that's the issue that we need to focus on, and that's the issue that we've been discussing either in regional institutions, such as the GCC and the Arab League, but also international communities, such as the United Nations.
As a seasoned diplomat, how worried are you, though, about the possibilities of escalation?
It's always a worry. It's always a huge concern for us. And again, if there is no solution and there's no permanent solution for the current case, I think a possibility for an escalation is always there.
As you were saying earlier, Qatar's been pivotal in negotiating aid deliveries to Gaza over the years. What's your assessment of the humanitarian situation in Gaza at the moment?
It's very, very critical. It's a very critical situation. The people in Gaza need the humanitarian assistance today more than ever. I think it's very essential, and Qatar has been calling in every single platform that it's important to expand and extend our reach out to the Palestinian people. We've seen the movement of a humanitarian aid recently in the last few days, but it's not enough. I think it's important that we ask for more. It's important that we help the people over there in Palestine for more peaceful and stable situation.
But if that doesn't happen, what's at stake, do you think, in Gaza? What happens next?
I think it's going to be disaster. I think it's going to be disaster. It's the situation over there is really horrible. The lack of water, food, medicine, fuel to generate the energy over there. It is not going to help sustaining the situation. So therefore, when we thought of establishing this task force, we thought it's very critical to focus also on the humanitarian assistance and to find our pathway towards helping and supporting Gaza as we did before.
And are both sides serious about trying to deal with that, or are they both playing games in trying to sort of, I guess, leverage the concern about the humanitarian situation?
Well, it seems that the international communities in general recognize the importance of humanitarian aid. There is always fear about what types of humanitarian assistance that can be provided due to the escalation that is happening between the two sides. But despite that, we've been always calling for the importance of supporting and helping the Palestinian people in any way, in any condition.
Are we expecting big news soon, do you think?
We hope so. We hope so. We're working towards that. And believe me, as soon as we secure that agreement, you will hear about it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And good luck.
Right, I'm back at 10, now over to Barbara in London.